The story of the birth of one of the most beloved teenage sitcoms of all time, Saved by the Bell, is a long and complex one, which all began with the death of another TV show brought to you by legend of television and no stranger to gone but not forgotten himself, Brandon Tartikoff. Okay, enough of that. Anyway, Tartikoff had a middle school teacher named Miss Bliss, who had a deep impact on his life, so he ordered TV producer Peter Engel to create a show that centered around a teacher named Carrie Bliss. The show was going to be called Good Morning Miss Bliss, and it was picked up by the Disney Channel. Because Disney commissioned the show, they decided to cast Disney royalty Hayley Mills. I could not name all the classic Disney films of the 60s that starred Hayley Mills in this video. It would be 3 hours long if I did, but if I had to pick one you would recognize, it would have to be the original movie of The Parent Trap. At this point, Hayley had never done TV and thought it would be fun. So the casting would then begin for 3 kids and 1 principal. And I was shocked to learn that the show's original pilot had cast actors who would go on to have huge TV careers of their own. Brian Austin Green, Jaleel White, and Jonathan Brandis were initially cast. But this pilot would be scrapped after getting low ratings. So Disney then ordered them to retool the show, so the kids would be aged up, and the search was on for actors to fill the roles. Mark Paul Gosselaar was a teen model who would fit Peter Engel's vision of the Ferris Bueller-like character of Zach Morris. Funnily enough, Mark is not blonde in real life, so for this entire series, he had to dye his hair. He's even joked in interviews that it is a miracle he still has any hair. Then there was Dustin Diamond, who had acted in a few small roles before being cast as Samuel Screech Powers. Diamond got the role when Mark read with him and insisted that he was perfect for the role of Screech, because he thought that this young actor was Screech in real life. The character's nickname had come about due to Peter Engel's lifelong pet peeve of the sound of people's nails on a chalkboard. Dustin was the youngest actor on the show, and Peter Engel has said that he didn't realize how young he was until they began shooting. Engel says that had he known, he wouldn't have cast him on the series. And knowing what we know now about Dustin Diamond, maybe he should have followed through with that instinct. The role of Lisa Turtle was written as a spoiled Jewish girl from Long Island, but then black teen model Lark Voorhees came in and read for the role, impressing Peter so much that he rewrote Lisa in order to give Lark the role. Max Batimo was then cast as Michael Mikey Gonzalez, the best friend of Zach, and Heather Hopper was cast as Nikki Coleman, a goody two-shoes who would often clash with Zach. As for Principal Richard Belding, he was portrayed as an incompetent and immature principal who often clashed with Miss Bliss. He was originally played by Oliver Clark, but after the end of Good Morning Miss Bliss, the character was changed into a mature and responsible principal who was friends with Bliss. While they were retooling the character, they thought that Belding should be a 50-year-old black man. But then Dennis Haskins caught wind of the role and campaigned hard for it. After undergoing 7 auditions, he would finally be cast. Hayley Mills says that doing Miss Bliss was a challenge for her, since it was the first time she had ever done television, and she wasn't used to the breakneck speed of the production. She said it kept her on her toes, and it was a lot harder to deal with the constant last-minute changes. And with the show failing to get enough ratings to warrant another season, the Disney Channel would unfortunately be forced to cancel the show. However, Tartikoff refused to give up on the series, and decided that he would pivot the show into being a sitcom for teenagers, a concept that at the time had never been done before. And not only that, he would air it on Saturday afternoons. This was unheard of, since Saturday programming was exclusively used for cartoons. When Brandon asked him to do this, Peter Engel was initially hesitant, because he didn't want to make children's TV. But he would eventually change his mind, and decided to drastically change the series. It would now focus on the teenagers, and was moved from its original setting in Indiana to the fictional town of Bayside, California. Peter said this was because kids were always fascinated with what life was like on the West Coast, Since California was always heavily promoted in the late 80s and early 90s as a state filled with dreamy Hollywood stars, surfing, hot girls in bikinis, and a laid-back attitude. When the show got retooled, they kept 4 characters from Miss Bliss: Zach, Lisa, Screech, and Mr. Belding. Unfortunately, Heather Hopper and Max Patimo were not asked to come back to the series. And there's been no reported reason for this decision. The only thing I was able to learn was that Max was so hurt by the loss of his role that he quit acting. A new love interest for Zach had to be created for the series, so the classic hot cheerleader Kelly Kapowski was created. 3 actresses were the finalists for the role of Kelly: future 90210 star Jenny Garth, dancer Elizabeth Berkeley, and former 1987 Miss Junior America Tiffany Amber Thiessen. It finally would come down to Tiffany and Berkeley, a decision that pitted Engel against the writers, as everyone wanted Berkeley to play Kelly because they felt she was the better actress. But Brandon Tartikoff and Peter Engel wanted Thiessen. Years later, in an interview on the Industry Standard with Barry Katz's podcast, Engel would say, quote, "No one wanted Tiffany, but Brandon and I, my staff, was up in arms. I said, I know. She can't walk, she can't talk, and she can't chew gum at the same time. But she's gonna be a major star." So a compromise would be made. Tiffany would play Kelly, and a new character would be created for Elizabeth Berkeley named Jessie Spano. Fun fact, Berkeley originally auditioned to be on Miss Bliss as a love interest for Zach, but she didn't get the role because she was taller than Gosler. But she stated that by the time Saved by the Bell came around, everyone else had grown to her height, so it was easier for her to get a role on the new show. Now every show needs a bad boy, and A.C. Slater was created to fit that role. The template for Slater was John Travolta's Vinnie Barbarino from Welcome Back, Kotter. However, they could not find an Italian-American actor that they liked, so they expanded the pool by changing his ethnicity, and that's when dancer Mario Lopez walked in and was immediately hired. Engel had noticed how the women in the office had swooned whenever he walked by. One of Mario's most remembered aspects of his character was that of his signature mullet. Lopez said that he was a fan of Mel Gibson at the time and grew his hair out in an attempt to emulate his look from the first Lethal Weapon. Later, he would tell People magazine he didn't even know he had a mullet. Much to the joy of teenage girls in the 90s, the reason for Slater's skimpy attire was Mario Lopez's love of dancing and his past as a wrestler in high school, where he was so talented that in his senior year, he placed 7th in his weight class at the California Interscholastic Federation State Wrestling Tournament in 1991. And the origin of the show's title is quite a funny one. Tartikoff wanted the word bell to be in the title, since he thought it evoked the feeling of high school. But Peter Engel thought the show should be called When the Bell Rings. Everyone in the writer's room hated that name, so senior producer Tom Tenowich suggested the series be called Saved by the Bell, which Engel hated, saying, quote, "That's the stupidest title I have ever heard." However, Brandon Tartikoff loved it and demanded that it be the name of the show. Peter Engel then tried to sabotage the name by saying that Saved by the Bell was probably copyrighted, but NBC's lawyers debunked that excuse. So in one last-ditch effort to kill the name, Engel commissioned the theme song with the explicit instruction not to use the title Saved by the Bell in the song. 3 composers would submit songs that were complete duds, but Scott Gale was the only one who did not follow Engel's instructions. The producers expected Engel to blow a gasket, but he loved the song, and it became the classic theme song we all know today. Years later, Scott Gale would say that the reason he ignored Peter Engel's orders for the song was because he never got his note. If you watch Saved by the Bell, you can spot 2 blatant influences on the style of the series. The frenemy relationship between A.C. Slater and Zach, and their constant rivalry for the attention of Kelly, is clearly emulating Reggie Mantle and Archie Andrews' battle over Veronica Lodge. The teenagers of Riverdale hung out at Pop's Diner, run by the kind and wise father figure Pop Tate, while the kids from Bayside hung out at the Max, owned by Max, who was a kind father figure to the teenagers. The other more blatant inspiration was John Hughes' iconic film Ferris Bueller's Day Off. in which characters are also constantly scheming and have the ability to break the fourth wall. Although there were times that Zach used his timeouts as a superpower. Maybe Zach Morris was the first mutant ever on television. Upon its premiere, critics hated the show, thinking that it was cheesy and shallow. But for all their complaints, the ratings took off. Saved by the Bell was a hit, and things soon began to snowball. One of the most remembered aspects of the show were the episodes that taught moral lessons. Looking back at them, they were heavy-handed, and at times could be problematic. One of the most memorable that is quoted and parodied to this day was Jesse's song.
No sabes! No sabes! No sabes! No sabes! That's what I want to do. I'm so excited! I'm so excited! No, he's so I know. So scared. I know.
An episode that revolves around Zach convincing the girls to form a pop group with him as their manager. Jesse is struggling with midterms as well as trying to perform with the group, so because of the late night studying and singing, she decides to turn to drugs. And not just any drugs, one of the most dangerous and addictive substances known to man. Caffeine pills! Yes, folks, Jesse Spano got addicted to something that you can buy over the counter at any Walgreens. However, this wasn't the original plan. In a 2016 Vulture article, Peter Engel said, quote, "What fans don't know is that when I originally wrote the episode with Tom Tenovich, Jesse was hooked on speed, not caffeine pills, but standards and practices, the censorial department of NBC vetoed it, saying that speed was too high for Saturday mornings. I insisted that we needed to start dealing with more important issues than we had in the past, and that speed was a vehicle not only for exploring drug use, but also the pressure that kids put on themselves to achieve. But standards and practices weren't budging. Then someone, I don't remember who, suggested, quote, what if she gets hooked on caffeine pills? The S&P folks talked it over and told us caffeine pills would get a green light. So we compromised it. We kept the episode virtually the same, but swapped out the speed. I wasn't pleased about it. After all, the average caffeine pill was the equivalent of a cup of coffee, if that. So we might as well have had Jesse get addicted to Earl Grey, or breaking into the Max to snort coffee grounds. And it is a shame, because if it wasn't for the fact that it was over caffeine pills, this scene is very well acted. Both Mark Paul Gosselaar and Elizabeth Berkeley were thrilled to do this scene, since it was a chance to push themselves as actors, with the live audience even being so shocked at the performance that they went quiet. Speaking of which, one of the most memorable aspects of the show was its live audience. Taping shows with a live studio audience was common for sitcoms at the time, using the audience's reaction as a way to provide authentic laughter to enhance the scene, as well as provide motivation for the actor's performance. What was not normal was the reaction that the audience on Saved by the Bell had whenever they taped. Peter Engel said that when the audience was brought in for the filming of the pilot, it was filled with teenagers, and the reaction was akin to the historic episode of The Ed Sullivan Show featuring the Beatles. Engel said that his worries that the show would fail would evaporate whenever he heard that crowd, because he knew that would translate to successful ratings. And this belief was confirmed when the pilot beat one of the most popular sitcoms of all time, Family Ties. However, it took the actors a while to get used to the live audience. Whenever they had to kiss, the audience would go which made them feel awkward. Dustin Diamond would later say that they had equipment to filter out any obscene sounds from the audience, which he said were quite common while filming. Saved by the Bell proved to be a hit, and fans soon began to swarm the cast whenever they left the studio. Merchandise was made and flew off the shelves at record speeds. It was quite common in the 90s to see teenagers wearing t-shirts with the actresses' faces on them, posters on their walls, trading cards in their back pockets, and even a Saved by the Bell board game. However, and surprisingly, NBC never renewed Saved by the Bell for multiple seasons, so the cast would always feel like every season would be the last. Gosler says that this was due to the fact that the show was a hit, but not the level it would eventually get to when they went to syndication. So the cast had a semblance of a normal life whenever filming stopped. The show would go on to last for 4 seasons, and later on, the episodes from Good Morning Miss Bliss would be re-edited, filmed with new intros from Zach Morris, and retitled Saved by the Bell: The Junior High Years. Then in season 3, the crew decided to try something different, and had the cast work at a beach resort during the summer. These 6 episodes would be dubbed by fans as the Malibu Sands arc. It introduced a new love interest for Zach, the New York-bred Stacey Carosi, played by Leah Remini, who has since gone on to have a great career in Hollywood, as well as the many future stars of television and film that would also guest star on the show, such as Tori Spelling as fan favorite Violet Bickerstaff, the girlfriend of Screech, as well as Bridget Wilson as a ditzy girl whom Zach would date from time to time, and Denise Richards as a girl who would pretend to drown so that Slater would date her. But one of the most interesting guest spots I spotted while watching the show was Scott Wolf, who would serve as an extra for many episodes of the show. But the most talked about character on Saved by the Bell came in its final season, when tough girl Tori Scott was introduced. This character would replace Kelly and Jesse for 10 episodes that were mixed in with other ones that both characters appeared in, but Tori was never in the same episodes as them. She wasn't even in the graduation episode. This has led to the most popular debates among fans, which have since been nicknamed the Tori Paradox. There are so many articles and videos online that have both reasonable and kooky theories as to Tori's disappearance. Some have said that it was just the normal high school phenomena of how high school social groups are fluid, change over time, and people aren't always with the exact same friends for every event. But then you have people throwing out theories like these episodes being just the result of Zach dreaming, alternate realities crashing into each other, and even a theory that proposes Tori died of a drug overdose. However, the real reason was that by the end of the final season, the cast had filmed the episodes that they were contracted for, and when NBC decided they wanted more, both Thiessen and Berkeley were committed to other projects and weren't contractually obligated to come back. So Tori would be introduced for the 10 episodes that NBC wanted, but she could not appear in the finale that had the kids graduating because it had already been filmed with Elizabeth and Tiffany. Funnily enough, Tori has gone on to become a LGBTQ pop culture icon, with many in the community confessing to having crushes on the character while growing up, a fact that the actress who played her, Leanna Creel, is proud of, since in 2010 she came out as a lesbian herself, and is now happily married to British studio manager Renat Greenberg. Sadly, the series was not exactly the most pleasant place to work on. As any teenager can tell you, melodramatic romance drama will follow you everywhere in life, and Saved by the Bell was not able to escape this, with all the teenagers involved in romance at one point or another. Mark Paul Gosselaar was one of the most cited serial daters because he would become involved with all 3 of his female castmates, the longest being with Lark Voorhees, whom he was in a relationship with for 3 years. Mario Lopez would also have a relationship with Tiffany Amber Thiessen for a while, which Peter Engel said made it a challenge to film due to this and the typical teenage drama from failed relationships that he had to mediate. Yet the saddest revelation was about the actor who played one of the most lovable nerds on TV at the time. Dustin Diamond was 3 years younger than the rest of the cast, and the age difference was a barrier that left him feeling isolated on the show. The 2 people who were closest to him were Mario Lopez and Dennis Haskins, who said that they saw Dustin as a little brother. But although they were civil to Dustin, the rest of the cast didn't socialize with him outside of filming. This led to a lot of resentment, and Diamond began to notice he was being treated differently from the other actors. For example, while the rest of the cast was being flown to glamorous locations like Paris or New York to promote the show, Dustin was sent to smaller and less desirable places like Spartanburg, South Carolina. Then, after the 4th season, NBC tried to continue the show by creating a spin-off called Saved by the Bell: The College Years. It would revolve around Zach, Slater, Screech, and Kelly and their adventures as freshmen in college. This spin-off would air on primetime television, but failed to get any ratings. Looking back, Peter Engel says his mistake was that he didn't bring back the rest of the cast and tried to make it different from the original show, which alienated fans of the original series. So the college years would end on a cliffhanger, where Kelly and Zach finally got engaged. In order to finish off that storyline and wrap up the entire series, NBC would commission a TV movie called Saved by the Bell: Wedding in Las Vegas. The film would revolve around the beloved characters having a wild adventure in Las Vegas, and ended with these two characters finally tying the knot after seeing their love and relationship evolving for the past 6 years. But that was not the end of the Bayside universe, as Saved by the Bell: The New Class would premiere on September 11th, 1993, and ended up lasting a whopping 7 seasons. This show would introduce new students for Mr. Belding to deal with, as well as their wacky antics, where some of the original characters would make cameos, and Screech would return as the assistant for Mr. Belding. After the end of this series, the Saved by the Bell universe would close its doors. That is until 2020, when a revival of the original series would premiere on Peacock. This revival would receive mostly positive reviews, but sadly got canceled after 2 seasons due to low viewership. Throughout the years and many spin-offs, the original cast would have its ups and downs. Tiffany Amber Thiessen would be cast on 90210, in addition to more mature roles on television, and is still acting today. Mark Paul Gosselaar would struggle to get more serious roles afterwards, eventually landing the role of Detective John Clark Jr. on NYPD Blue, which showcased his large range as an actor. He's still active today, and has performed in roles across a series of genres, whether it be serious, comedic, or action. As for Mario Lopez, he's had a long and impressive career himself. Not only has he continued to act on television, film, and even on Broadway, but he's also written fitness books, and even a children's book, and currently hosts the entertainment news program Access Hollywood, a position he's held since 2019. Sadly, not everyone was quite as lucky. Elizabeth Berkeley's career was the most talked about after the series ended, when she got a role in the infamous box office bomb, Showgirls. Berkeley was eviscerated by critics for her performance, and it took years for her career to recover. But today, she has since starred in a variety of roles on stage, film, and television. And Showgirls has gone on from being a box office bomb to a beloved cult classic. That film may have started out as a serious drama, but is now considered a campy black comedy that serves as an unintended satire of the pursuit of fame and Hollywood culture. It's also been embraced by the LGBTQ community for its glamour, camp, and daring representation of sexuality for its time, with fans watching the flick in watch-alongs and midnight screenings. Lark Voorhees would go on to have numerous roles in TV and film, but was forced to take a break from acting in 2012 when she began to suffer from schizoaffective disorder. Later, she would go on to appear in the 2020 revival of Saved by the Bell, and continues to seek out roles today, but has since become a mental health advocate. Dennis Haskins continues to act in small roles to this day, and has become one of the few cast members who regularly interact with fans at conventions. However, he has since dropped out of the public eye, which has led to rumors he may be battling cancer. So we send our best wishes to Mr. Haskins. Yet the most tragic story to come out of Saved by the Bell is that of the struggles of Dustin Diamond. Due to his isolation from most of the cast and being typecast as Screech, Dustin became very bitter, and this led him down a dark path. He would develop an addiction to drugs and alcohol, and during this time had negative experiences with fans. If they were lucky, Dustin would be a personable actor who would take pictures with the fans and gladly talk about the show. But on a bad day, which were many, he would be rude and come off as bitter, and things only got worse when Dustin made some disastrous career choices. He began to appear in reality shows, which damaged his public image. One of his most notable appearances was on Celebrity Boxing, which had him going in the ring with Ron Palillo, who played Horshack on the 70s sitcom Welcome Back, Kotter. He was 28 years older than Dustin, and weighed 144 pounds up against Diamond's 198 pounds. And it was a massacre, with the audience watching Dustin beat Ron so badly that he got left with 2 black eyes, and the fight had to be stopped. Afterwards, he would appear on Celebrity Fit Club, which featured him getting into on-air arguments with the cast of the show, with Dustin later saying that he was paid by the producers to play the villain on this reality series. Then, a sex tape featuring Diamond would be quote-unquote leaked to the public. It was an obvious publicity stunt, with Dustin later admitting that a double was used for the sex scenes. But his most damaging moment was when he released his tell-all book, Behind the Bell, in which he accused the cast of having threesomes, an incident of date rape, and drug use, with Dustin later saying that the book was written by a ghostwriter who either exaggerated or made up things to garner sales. This would create a rift between him and the rest of the cast, leading to many feelings of betrayal. Mario Lopez was deeply hurt himself, since he had considered Dustin a little brother. Then in 2014, Diamond would go to jail after stabbing someone in a bar fight. Though he would express regret years later and apologize to the cast for his actions, he would sadly pass away of cancer in February 2021. At only 44 years old. His tale is a cautionary one of the darkness behind the entertainment industry, with many taking advantage of a man tormented by personal demons and drug use for their financial gain, and it is heartbreaking that such stories still exist today. However, the cast would pay tribute in an episode of the Saved by the Bell revival, and shared their regrets that he was the victim of opportunists, choosing instead to see him as a true comedic talent, and highlighting all the positive memories they had of him from the show. Saved by the Bell is still fondly remembered today by fans, who have created such fan-made projects like Bayside the Musical, a stage parody send-up of the classic show, which ran off-Broadway to much success. Dennis Haskins was himself a fan, and Dustin Diamond even participated in the show for a few performances. I saw it in person years ago and thought it was hysterical. Then on the popular YouTube channel Funny or Die was a web series called Zach Morris is Trash, a tongue-in-cheek send-up that pointed out how much of a horrible, selfish, and at times even sadistic human being Zach Morris was. Dashiell Driscoll, the writer and creator of the series, would even get hired as a writer on the 2020 revival, where he became a driving force of its critical success. As for whether Saved by the Bell should come back once again, I think it's become rather obvious that we have sucked dry this IP for a long while. So I don't think there's anything new that could possibly be done with it. However, if you want to go through the entire Saved by the Bell franchise, it is all online and ready to watch. You can watch the original Saved by the Bell and Miss Bliss on Tubi, alongside the TV movies Saved by the Bell Hawaiian Style and Wedding in Las Vegas. If you're a Prime Video subscriber, you can see Saved by the Bell The New Class, while the college years is only available to rent or buy on Prime Video. We can look back at Saved by the Bell nowadays as silly Saturday morning fluff, but in reality, it was a pioneer for teenage-focused television programming, serving as a blueprint for many Disney shows that future generations would grow up with. So if you ever want to see some high school shenanigans from the comfort of your own home, then you are in luck, because the memories of Bayside High are only one click away. Just make sure you watch out for that blonde kid with the devilish smile. Until next time, this is Jesse Shade speaking on behalf of Dave Arroyo for the JoBlo YouTube network, and we will see you next time on the next episode of Gone But Not Forgotten.
Thank you for clicking on our video, everybody. If you like what you saw here, please make sure you like the video and subscribe and share with your friends who like this sort of content. JoBlo remains an independent company, and we appreciate all of your support.